USD230 Board of Education. We will start with roll call.
Mrs. Horn,
Here.
Mr. Chitwood,
Here.
Mrs. Milius, Mr. Ewing,
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Here.
Mr. Hull, Mrs. Baker. Here. We have a quorum.
Great. Moving on to the Pledge of Allegiance, please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on. I did it again. Moving back, let's go to approval of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam. I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I didn't even have to have you tell me that I skipped it.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Okay, please collect the vote.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker. Yes. Mrs. Horn.
Yes.
Approved.
Great. Moving on to our mission and vision. We like to start each meeting with reading our mission and vision to keep that at the forefront of everything we do. Our mission is to be a school district that engages students to learn, create, adapt, and succeed in an ever-changing world. And our vision is to maintain small town values and empower each student to achieve world-class success. So with that in mind, we'll move on to business with individuals.
No cards were presented.
Okay. Moving on rather quickly here to the consent agenda, which consists of approval of the consent agenda items, approval of the minutes, clerk's report, treasurer's report, payroll and claims, personnel, teaching and learning, curriculum purchases and renewals, content filter, acceptable use policy, and a paper towel bulk purchase. Is there any discussion before we have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would you please collect the vote?
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood.
Yes.
Approved.
Okay, great. Moving on to action items. The first action item is the Spring Hill High School orchestra trip, which we had as a discussion item previously. It's to Orlando, Florida. I see Mr. Ozakinchi is here. If anyone has any questions, does anybody have anything before we look to approve that? Good evening, sir.
How are you?
Great.
Anybody have any questions?
Are you excited? Are you excited about going?
Yes, everyone's good. I do have good news. Early Wednesday morning, Dr. Luciano and I was invited to his office and we had a meeting. I got to see the office, the upstairs, all that. I shared a couple quotes with him. One of them included airfare. The other one was just a bus quote and including our contract, which was done prior to the earlier board meeting. It was done on 3rd of this month, I think. Anywho, that determined the dates. I think that was one of the questions that was asked last time I appeared in front of you. So the dates are set, and then we had a couple of quotes. I told Dr. Dutraub we're pretty much probably end up going with just taking a bus ride instead of reconsidering the airfare and all that. And then by Wednesday morning, our cost was $1,570. By Thursday afternoon, that dropped down to $1,280.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just they got a new quote. They're trying at all times, so it's just out of luck. You know, we saved money, that kind of stuff. So,
That's great.
any questions? We discussed what kind of questions were up in the air Wednesday morning, and I was able to answer anything they could come up with. I mean, so I'm here tonight.
Hi.
Hi.
One of the questions I have, so Orlando should be popular going by bus for
Yeah.
adults, maybe not so much. How's your chaperone situation looking?
Our middle school orchestra director, Miss Julie Pape, she'll be chaperoning as well for sure. I can think of up to 5 parents. They have soft confirmation, let's say that. I can't promise they will all be riding the bus with us. There's, depending on the attendance list, I have requested maybe a school district suburban, that we will have to discuss the details on that too. Cause the coach, I think it's the 56 passenger, and our enrollment will exceed 60 next year. I don't know who will be going, or what, we'll see. So I definitely don't want to rent another bus. I know that.
Yeah.
So, I'm not turning anybody away either, but we'll see. what the
If you
numbers-
don't have enough chaperones, you'll start recruiting board members. to go.
Sure, well, yeah.
Yeah, that was not a volunteer. That was, yeah.
But you're planning on getting the chaperone thing worked out, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Not to lead you in a leading question. No, these things.
We typically have a good turnout.
Mhm.
If we can, I would think like 10 one chaperone per 10 students. We always have that number, if not more. So.
Mhm. So this is to give permission to go since it's out of state, and then there might be a possibility of a school vehicle if there's an overflow needed.
Again, I'm not a big fan of that either, but because that's gonna create an issue of driver. I will have to take the lead on that, or some volunteering parent maybe,
Mhm.
but, we'll
But the
see.
bus price is significantly lower than
Yeah, it's
doing
$290
flying.
lower.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So you want as many kids to be able to go as possible, right? Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any further questions? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve the orchestra trip to Florida, Orlando.
Madam President, I shall entertain you by moving to approve 7.01 for the orchestra to go to Orlando for
Period.
approval.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this Spring Hill High School Orchestra trip to Orlando. Further discussion? Okay, please collect the vote. Mrs. Henderson.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
approved.
Okay, thank you. Have a great trip. We can't wait to hear about it. Moving on to 7.02 property casualty and workman's compensation rates for fiscal year 25. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, we spent quite a bit of time in our last meeting going over the quotes and the just some history as to why their rates have increased the past few years. One thing I did want to point out and make sure there's no confusion is there is the additional insured on there still of Hilltop, and the reason is because even though we are vacating that very soon, it's going to be after the July 1st renewal date. It won't be until around the 15th of July. And so, and again, they're just not going to take our word that we'll vacate it. So we have to maintain that through the 15th, pay the premium. But then we will, when we do officially say, okay, they are gone out, we don't have any additional insured for them, they will credit us to our account any extra funds. But that's the reason that is on there. So other than that, it's pretty well there. Now they did, I think Mr. Swin, did work out. We did go to save just a little bit from the quote last month, and Doug or can talk to that, but we did agree with the deductible piece. So just real quick.
Yeah, we, after last board meeting, we kind of got the quote late, so we didn't really have a chance to really flesh it all out. And so we had some additional conversations after the June 10th meeting. There was an option that we, Jay and Joe Aaron, which are both here tonight, was able to visit with EMC, and I think it's an option to me that's a kind of a no-brainer. And I've added that description in board docs as far as the cost savings that we could achieve if we increase our all other perils deductible from 10,000 all the way up to 50,000. So, but as far as how that works, Jay and Joanne are the experts, so I'll turn it over to them if you have questions on that, but.
Okay, well, thanks. Before I start, I will tell you, you'll get about a $6,000 return from Hilltop when we take that off the policy, so you'll get that back. On the deductible options, so we've checked these about every year for the last several years, and there has not been a significant savings. But now all of a sudden, there's a sweet spot, we call it a lot of times in the rating system. And remember, you're gonna have a 75,000 per location deductible for a wind and hail claim. The all other perils will cover everything but a wind hail claim. And so if you were to take that, you've been at $10,000. If you take it to 25, it's gonna save you about $14,000. So you're gonna go from 10 to 25, so you're taking on about $15,000. You're gonna get $14,000 credit. So if you've averaged less than one claim a year. You've had 2 claims since 2018. So that would save you 14. If you go to 50, it's going to be a $32,000 savings. And our recommendation is you consider that $50,000 deductible. I believe it's well worth you'll take on an additional $40,000 and you'll save 32 of it in the first year. It's just something you kind of have to budget for, much like replacing textbooks or computers or furniture or whatever you'll just have to put it in your budget that, hey, we got the first $50,000 for a claim. Still an occurrence deductible.
So that's your recommendation and that's your recommendation. So is that reflected in what we have before us to approve those recommendations?
Yeah, as far as tonight, the one thing, the one key to remember with insurance, it's constantly changing. We could go, Enterprise could call up tomorrow and say, hey, let's flip 10 cars because the market's right. And so we'll be canceling insurance on 10 and starting new insurance on 10. So even though we have a number tonight for the renewal, at the end of the year, that's probably not going to be the number. It just gives you an idea what the ballpark figure is for this year. And just like with the cyber, we could go shopping for cyber coverage and start it September 1 or, whatever we would decide. We'd start paying those premiums. And if it was 7/1 to 6/30, it would be prorated or whatever the case might be. So insurance, just like at home with all of us, we can make changes at any time. So.
Okay, so with that recommendation there, I would ask to entertain a motion for the approval of the property casual and workman's compensation rates for fiscal year 25.
With what deductible?
I think we'll
With the
go
recommended
the
$50,000.
recommended higher $50,000 deductible, yeah.
Okay, so that's 50,000 and I'm sorry, that applies to everything?
For the AOP deductible.
It's the
correct?
AOP deductible and it'll basically applies to the property premium. So you would reduce it down from 493 to, if you look down in your docs there, I think it's 461.
And so all other perils, meaning everything other than wind and hail.
On the 50, and that impacts coverage. I just want to make sure I'm reflecting what the coverage is with that. So you have a fire, it's going to be $50,000 deductible. Okay. You have a lightning strike, 50,000. So it doesn't impact the coverage amounts in here. I just wanted to make sure.
It does not decrease
Okay.
the values.
Right. That's all where I was going. Okay. Well, then, Madam President, I move to approve agenda item 7.02 with direction to execute on the $50,000 deductible option for AOP.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the property casual and workers' compensation as recommended. Is there any further discussion or questions? Okay, Mrs. Henderson, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
approved.
Great, thank you
Thank you
both.
for your business. We look forward to working with you. Thanks. Yeah, we hope not to see you at all.
Moving on to discussion items, we have 8.01 policy updates, everyone's favorite.
Okay, we do have several policy updates now. Again, just for clarity purposes, these policy updates this evening are a direct result of changes that were impacted from recent legislation or federal legislation. It has nothing to do yet with the KASB policy overhaul review that we're fixing to get involved with. These are just statute legislative session at the federal and state level, and the ones that we chose to move forward. And Dr. Robinson's going to kind of briefly again, kind of give you an overview of those. Those were also spelled out in your attachments.
And Rachel did put at your table a packet that looks kind of like this. It may be easier to go through. I'll talk pretty high level tonight. If you've got questions, I'll do the best I can to answer them. And if there's something I don't have the answer to, we can track it down and get it back to you. If they're highlighted in gold, it's a statutory or a federal law change that's impacting it. And I'll highlight that. And then there's a few that after working with Mr. Goheen, we'll bring them back to you probably late July or early August. But I'll give some rationale for that as well. On the front page, there's 3 that are connected. BBG, which is for consultants, CJ, which is for consultants, and then CL just points to those other 2 policies. Essentially what KSB and Greg took a look at it with me is recommending is eliminating BBG. BBG and CJ duplicate a lot of the same information. And what it does is there's some wording in them that almost conflicts. So they've added wording to CJ to make it to where you really wouldn't need the first policy at all. So you might take a look at it. I think all that BBG says is that the board can use consultants. It doesn't give really any rationale as to how you would do it, what your limitations are, anything like that. What they've added into CJ is essentially a clause that would require us if the superintendent or designee are accessing consultants that we're reporting that information back to the board and keeping the board informed. So I think these are not required by statute. We could keep them separate if the board chooses. But I think it would make it clearer moving forward using those policies if we eliminated BBG.
Could you remind me I should know this off the top of my head, but the B policies and the C policies, what categories are those?
B is board and C, I believe, I'd have to look, I think is more of your general practices.
Okay. So we don't have to have a policy in both of those places for this.
No. The other one that's on the front page that is recommended for revision that's not required by law is BCBK, and it's related to executive session specifically. Really what they've done, it was a pretty wordy policy. It was a couple pages long. They've shortened it down a little bit, and they've made sure that the reasons that you would go into executive session match the Open Meetings Act. We were pretty close with our policy, but it probably would make sense for the wording to be exact. So I would recommend that we make that change as well. Moving to the second page, EBBG, cardiac emergency response planning. This was actually a policy led by the Project Atom group. And so it has now been passed by legislators and gone into Kansas law. The good news for us is we should already be in compliance with this at all of our schools because of the work that our nurses and others have already done. But it is one that we need to make sure our policy matches what's in statute. It essentially is putting in the same expectations that we already have in place, training requirements that AEDs are accessible, making sure you've got an emergency response plan specific to cardiac situations. All of those were in good shape, but it would make sense just to make sure those continue, even if Project Atom goes away, for it to go into our policy. I'm going to come back to EE, food service, because of a discussion we want to have while we're here tonight. GARIA, this went into effect last year for the first time. It was initially there for, under the Pump Act, it was there for, to make sure that we had space for new mothers. With Title IX is going to impact several of our policies in the future. This one, Greg looked at 4 of our policies related to Title IX. This is the only one we're bringing to you tonight. The other 3 we're holding. This one is related to discrimination, specifically related to pregnancy, that you're not discriminating because someone may be pregnant, may anticipate becoming pregnant in the future. So we're recommending moving ahead with this. The others we're holding because there's multiple states right now that are challenging it. Potentially Kansas may be one of them. And what we don't want to do is change our policy, have to come back and revert back to the old policy. We'd like to wait and see where some of that goes. If it's not resolved in late July, early August, we may have to come back with a policy change to stay compliant with the law. But there are 3 policies noted at the end of this document that we're holding right now to see where that goes. So this is the only one that's impacted right now by Title IX that we're bringing forward for consideration. Any questions so far? The next policy that's there, JBCC. This one is the non-resident enrollment one that we put in last year to be able to manage open enrollment. The changes they've made, I'll hit just real quickly. They all probably help us. One, they are grandfathering in students who were already attending in the district and live outside of the district. This was already a practice that we were put in place. We were working this direction, so it doesn't impact any decisions that we've made already. What it does is make sure that we're compliant with the law. There were 2 different interpretations about whether those students were grandfathered in, and we had decided pretty early on that we were going to grandfather them in rather than displace them. So the policy change would make sure our practice matches policy. It does identify that if we have open seats, which we don't this year, that they would need to go to Kansas residents before that was extended to residents or students from outside of Kansas. I think that's a rare situation for us. It's probably more if we have staff that are driving over, but virtual schools do not have to comply with this expectation. We had not presented a virtual school capacity presentation to the board, in part because our virtual school is open already statewide. It has a large capacity. We weren't sure if that would be something we would be called on or not. This clarifies that virtual schools would not need to provide all of that information. Our biggest concern with that previously was their window for enrolling is open throughout the fall. If they did have to comply with this, it would have meant they would have had to follow the tight window of July for open enrollment, which could have actually decreased their numbers. John, you look like you had a question.
You can read it on my face. I don't play poker very well. No, that's an interesting point because I think the way you added in Kansas and the virtual, I'm not sure how even more explicit that we have to be that the virtual school is only open to Kansas residents.
Yeah.
Even though it's not impacted by the open enrollment. You get where I'm going, which is I can't live in Montana and enroll in USD230's virtual school.
And I don't know that this would be the place we'd want to change it. I'll take a better look before the next meeting at our actual enrollment policy and our virtual school handbook, just to see if that's already spelled out there. And we'll look at we'll make sure it's identified, but I understand what you're getting at.
Yeah, well, in the same direction of, I'm trying to think of the statutory language and how it would impact it, because if you lived on the Kansas side and were enrolled in the virtual school and you moved to Missouri, I think you would then be ineligible for the virtual school.
I think
in the way that grandfather language.
So I think I want to double check to make sure I'm right.
And I'm not sure either. And that's why I'm literally.
I think Kansas law would allow us still to enroll them. I think it becomes a funding issue as to whether or not we would get funding.
And I don't think we would.
So I'll take a better look at what's already in place and we can provide that information at the July 8th meeting, if that's okay.
No.
The only other piece of JBCC that was impacted is they significantly changed the application dates. This probably impacts Rachel and I more than anybody else because they opened it up from January 1st through June 15th, where before it was about a 1 month. It was June 1st through June 30th. So we could be receiving out of district enrollment applications the entire second semester. With that, though, they did extend the deadlines for notification and managing the lottery. So I will also be bringing at the July meeting first draft of what our timelines will look like for next year, because they will need to change to match statute as well. JDAA is not required, but is recommended. It essentially closes a gap in our policy related to prescription drugs, and would allow us to, it's already in our handbook, sort of, that we could administer discipline if a student is misusing or distributing prescription drugs. This would essentially say if you have a student who is taking them at a much higher rate than what's prescribed, that you could take disciplinary action. It would give our schools a little bit of flexibility and support to address the matter. Again, it's one we don't have to adopt, but it probably closes a gap in our current policy.
You saw
yeah.
my wheels turning again, because
Yep.
I was, actually, I hate to back us up, but students not in good standing, non-resident students not in good standing in JBCC, just the language around essentially, I think this language is saying that if a student becomes not in good standing, I think it's saying they have to go back through the entire process again.
Yeah, we already.
And get in line with everybody else.
Yes, and it also outlines what they have appeal rights to.
Yeah, they can appeal,
as well,
yeah.
Which is something that wasn't addressed in the previous policy.
Right, and then. Okay. I'm just kind of stuck on that language, maybe not getting them all the way to, you have to go get back in line with everybody else, but.
Well,
Sorry.
Essentially, if we deem they're not a student in good standing, we're saying they need to enroll in their home district. So they would have to re-enter the lottery and apply again.
So they would.
And the other part of the policy that's not changing, we set last year clearer criteria as to what deemed a student to not be in good standing anymore.
Yeah.
So we identified attendance criteria and discipline criteria. So if they're meeting those thresholds, this puts a protection in for the district and for the other students in the district to ask them to return to their district of residence.
Okay, so they may apply for the non-resident enrollment lottery.
Yeah.
And
the other part I didn't highlight here is they've also allow you to utilize student in good standing when you're accepting students as well, which seemed common sense to the rest of us, but was not part of the previous statute.
well, and kind of the other part where I'm hung up is how is this appeal process different than their essentially good standing appeal that they would have, I presume, already gone through?
So if I remember right, they can't appeal the student in good standing piece. It's a final decision. But I'll double check that.
Well, I'm going back to the disciplinary action that gets them there. And that's an appeal. And so.
So if they go through long-term suspension, for example, there is a clear appeal process as part of that.
Right. And at the end of that, in essence, that appeal results in a determination of you're not in good standing by the board. So I'm kind of like, okay, well, the board's already decided you're not in good standing. So why is there then an appeal of the board picking and choosing who's
If I remember right, the appeal process here, I'd have to pull it up to be sure. But
if a non-resident student's application for enrollment is denied because the student is determined not to be in good standing, the parent or person acting as a parent may appeal the administration's decision to the board. And so kind of where I'm going is I think from my seat, I would want to respect another board's determination of a student not being in good standing, and that they get two appeals is where it ends up. We don't have to resolve it now. I'm just speaking out
Yeah.
loud of what
We'll take a better look at
where
it.
I'm hung up.
And I'll ask Mr. Goheen to look at it as well, just to make sure that it's not a due process right that would actually protect the district
Yeah.
as well. Coming down to the end, JH, the student activities addition, I think last year it added in that students that were considered homeschool could participate in activities. This extends the same rights to virtual school students. And it essentially prohibits districts from saying you have to come on our campus and take a certain number of classes to be able to participate. All of that was changed in statute. And so this is just to get us in alignment with us. It probably, I was talking with Mrs. Martin, probably only impacts a small number of students that we have. Because so many of ours live far enough away that they're not choosing to participate in activities. But we have had a couple that have requested this in the past.
Would this apply to students that live in our district in other virtual schools too?
I think this one is specific to those who have residency in the district.
But if they're like not an Insight, but another virtual school?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. I think it's filling a loophole that if I was homeschooled but using a virtual platform,
Mhm.
there were some kids who were running into roadblocks that they couldn't participate in activities. So it is closing that gap.
But if they're in another district in our virtual school, they would have to participate in that district.
Should, yes. And then the last one here is just clarification. Last year we put in a new policy KK, which essentially gave legislators first right if we were looking to close and sell one of our facilities. This puts some clarification to what's actually considered a school building. It also addresses, I'm assuming someone ran into an issue where they were closing a facility while the legislators were not in session. So it allows for some of that. I think like any law, they put it in place last year, and this is kind of a cleanup bill to make it make a little bit more sense. To be honest, I don't have a lot more information than that. If there's something more you want to know, I think the good news for us is we're going the opposite direction. So we're probably not in a spot where we're closing facilities anytime soon, and more looking at how do we manage growth. So I don't know that this will impact us, but it does get us into compliance with Kansas law.
So it would impact us if there was a building somewhere that, like the Hilltop situation, it could have impacted that if that statute would have been in place back.
Yeah, the advantage right now to Hilltop is that you made the decisions
Right.
to sell, lease many years ago, so it wouldn't fall under this law. But yes, if you were doing that now, it would apply. The only other thing I was going to mention, I made two notes at the bottom. One are the other laws that are impacted, are the other policies that are impacted by Title IX. And that may give us an opportunity as a board to talk through. There's some pretty significant changes proposed in the new Title IX regs. The other two, ID and IF, were also recommended for KSB to be reviewed. If you remember last year, we did a pretty big overhaul to IF.
Mhm.
ID, all it changed was the word certified to license. So in reviewing it with Mr. Goheen, we chose to leave it for right now and not make any additional changes since we had just changed that policy. They're trying to address some of the same things we addressed in our policy last year. If you want to see their recommendations, I can share it with you. But
If
we
there
won't
is,
recommend it.
before, August or whenever you said, if there were some things that you wanted to bring before the board, just kind of as an overview or discussion, we are having a work session on the 29th of July. We're doing the, budget and the finance, but that might be a good time just to
Come
do a
back
little
and-
briefing or
Yep.
something if there was some more information.
The only other policy change I was going to mention, the actual policy change is a fairly easy one. EE, which is our food service management one. During pandemic, they had put in a waiver, the federal government had, to allow school districts to provide school lunch even when school was closed. That waiver has since gone away. So the last part of our policy was all addressing how that would be provided and putting us in compliance with those waivers. Since the waiver is no longer there, we're removing that piece of the policy. The other piece of the policy, and I may ask JC to come and assist me with this part of it, that we really wanted to have a discussion is more about outstanding lunch fees. And if I remember correctly, our current policy as it's written does not allow for students to continue to eat lunch with outstanding lunch balances.
Six
correct?
meals, after 6 meals have been charged.
And that's been something we've had some kind of internal discussions about how hard to draw that line. Is it important that kids receive lunch? And wanted to get some feedback from the board on just what your feeling is. I don't remember off the top of my head what our overage cost was for the year. Do you or Doug remember?
We're over just a little over negative 2,400. And last year we were a little over negative 1,400.
So this is, we kind of talked about this a little bit in agenda review. But my thought on it is sometimes parents are well aware of this and they are trying to train their child to be responsible. And so it's not that the child is starving but they have options. The parents are giving them options and they want them to make wise choices and they're not. So I wouldn't want to stand in the way of that, but that might not always be the case. So I don't know whether that just muddies the water more, but I know of situations of people that I know that are like, I tried to, tell my child that I gave them this money for their lunch and they didn't spend it on that. So then too bad.
We did get those phone calls.
So that would be my comment on that.
Yeah, I probably struggle maybe with the younger kids because it's really out of their control. And I think it more punishes a teacher than the parent by not feeding them. Is there any action that we take against the parents? Like, I mean, I don't know, if I don't pay my bills, people come knocking on my door, right? So is there like legal action or is there something that happens that would more go at the parents and less at the kid?
Well, right now they get daily reminders via Skyward. Once they hit $10, they've got $10 in the account. And then once it hits 0, then it will say, you have so many. And then when you get to 6, you're no longer allowed to charge. All the kids charge this year. It's mainly a problem with the secondary level at the high school. It is not a problem with K-5. And I don't think that's because our cashiers have more time to call families. And sometimes it's those families that just need a little motivation to fill out a nutrition benefit form that then qualify as a free student. And then we get at-risk funds on count day for them. Because if they don't, we don't get any funds for them. We have a couple families who they'll call and they'll say, we're not going to qualify. And we know, so we have a fund there that we can cover. We can put a little in there to get them through, or we work out a plan with them. But then there's a handful that do not, and the kids just keep charging and charging. And then we had a couple parents the last week of school that were really upset that their students were able to charge up as high as we let them go at the high school level.
At the high school level, do we have a way to cut them off? I mean, not the 6 meals necessarily, but if a parent's like, look, I don't want them charging. I don't want them is there a way to mark that student so that
we can mark them where they cannot make any purchases?
Right.
Yeah.
Or just not purchase a la carte, which we have some families that do that as well.
Okay.
I think back, I don't know, maybe some of you guys that have been around a while remember this, but I remember at one point I don't know, there's official or unofficially made a decision as a board that we're not turning parents over to collection agencies because they have, they have account balances, but I don't know. Doug, do you remember that discussion?
Yeah, we haven't done that. If we do go down that road, it's going to take a lot of staff time to do it and do it right.
Yeah.
So we're not picking on anybody in particular. I think we have the authority in the board policy. I'm not sure which one it is to go and utilize the state collection program that they have. But we do, I mean, I would compare our outstanding balances with anybody around us. Our staff does an amazing job hounding people and getting the money in. I mean, our food service balance is extremely low compared to some districts out there. So, and that's just a testament to the staff really working hard and working with parents. We try to encourage parents, hey, if you're having a tough time, just tell us, we'll make payment. We'll allow you to make payments to get you caught back up, and we work with our family. So
I think there's also community organizations that would help out if there was a crisis within a family, that there's our community would stand behind some of that too. So I don't know if that gives you any kind of direction at
The
all.
reason this
Other-
is in place was in I think it was 2017, USDA said public schools that have the federal meal program have to have a charge policy in place.
Mhm.
Whatever bad debt at the end of the school year is supposed to be paid for by the school or the general fund.
Gotcha.
You know,
So we
were-
got to follow the law too, so.
Right, and having a charge policy. Now, it's the district's discretion on what that charge policy said. And this is the one that we came up with. Dr. Burke and Mr. Wilson and I kind of sat down and went through it, and it was similar to other districts. So I know a lot of districts have changed. And so it just depends on what you guys want us to do, because we're not currently following it. We are not cutting them off at 6 meals.
Yeah, other than seniors, is there any flag that pops up when they try to re-enroll for the next year? Like we owe $80 for enrollment and you owe 107 for last year's lunch charges.
They'll see their food service balance on that, on the enrollment, on the pages. That it's just going to show, it's not going to say you've got to pay before we feed your kiddo.
Can we mark it so they have to pay it? Or like if they give us $80, it goes towards the food and not the enrollment?
I
You
do
can't say
think we
that.
have that ability to take and then apply it to the oldest debt versus the new. We're still chasing the same amount of money, but I do believe we have the authority to do that.
I would just say if they're not struggling to,
Phil, you might have a comment.
Control.
Yeah, not exactly. We have the ability, Skyward automatically will credit the oldest balance in the category.
Mhm.
So if you're paying your school fees, it will credit the oldest one first, but the lunch fees are in a separate bucket. So those don't cross back and forth.
Mhm. Yeah, I do think we want to hold people accountable because it's just the right thing to do, I mean,
Well, what about like participating in extracurricular activities? If you're wanting to play football, but you have an outstanding balance from the previous year, maybe you can't go to practice, or maybe we don't release your grades. I don't know. I mean, something there, I feel like there should be some sort of consequence, but
Well,
I don't-
I almost like that better than 6 lunches, like stop feeding them.
I mean,
I've been biting my tongue for the discussion to
let's
go
hear it.
on because,
Let's
yeah.
hear it, John.
Well, I've done this rodeo before and had this discussion before in a previous life. And I share Mr. Schwinn's comment. We're talking about 0.3% of our budget, 0.3% of our food budget. If any company had 0.3% of bad debt, anybody in charge of credit would be getting the biggest bonus in the world. So I don't view this as a huge issue. Having said that, I am not a fan of denying access to food for kids. Full stop, period, end of story. Hungry kids don't learn. I'm sorry. And, the argument, the parents say, don't feed them. I'm sorry, unless it's a dietary or other thing from my seat, kids got to eat. The questions I would have about this are, do we have any balances over $600?
No,
Okay, so we're not even rising to the level of being able to issue a 1099 to somebody and make this a tax liability for them and push back on the teachers. Having extended a lot of credit, I can tell you the squeeze is not worth the juice to work with any reporting agencies or credit and collections. I mean, we're not even talking about pennies on the dollar. And I'll be really honest, quite frankly, the amount of time that has probably been spent on this and staff time is we've probably thrown the same amount of money going after it. So that's my personal opinion and my read on the situation. So where I'm sitting, I would be in favor of actually not limiting the amount of meals people can get. You put a child in a situation of, hey, we can't afford it. We have something at home. Yes. Are there children that need to have personal responsibility? Absolutely. Are there parents out there that don't have personal responsibility and their children pay the price for it? Yeah, that happens too. So I'm one for erring on the side of having fed students. So I'll get off my soapbox.
So one last question that I would have is is there a way that you can limit them doing the à la carte stuff? And just like they get the basic meal and
Yes,
that's it?
and that is, it's, once they hit zero, they should not be able to get à la carte. Now, in the beginning, if they bring through something that's, it's opened or it's a open sandwich, or they've gotten a bowl of, a mashed potato bowl or something, and we can't take it back, we do charge the account. We'll do that for about the first 4 to 5 weeks. And then there are some students that may use that to their advantage. And so
Mhm.
then we just have to start taking it, setting it aside,
Mm.
because it just
Okay.
keeps racking up. But
So
the
they
policy
go pick
says
it
no
up when
à la
they know they
carte.
can't have it.
Yeah, but the policy does say no à la carte without funds in the account. Then you can charge 6 reimbursable meals. That's what it
I-
currently says.
I really love the extracurricular idea because if like they don't maintain their grades, if they don't take care of business in other ways, then they cannot participate. I think it's a good way for people to feel a little bit of consequence, but feed them at the same time. Because I agree with John. I really appreciate that you guys have not stopped feeding students, because I would worry about the one student that we got the phone call that said, don't feed them, but they really need it. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah, and
I
we're,
wouldn't be able to do that. Say
and
no.
we're punishing children and teachers at that point.
That's right. We're punishing the wrong people.
My only question with extracurriculars, one of them would be whether our staff has the time to chase it too.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna get into a situation where it's very fluid. You would essentially be sending either your office staff or your AD at each building chasing them down on a regular basis. I don't know that that's worth, to Mr. Chitwood's point, worth the dollar amount that we get.
Is there a way to do we have to have one policy for all the schools, or could the high school have a separate policy from?
I've seen some schools that they do a like elementary or K-5 and they do a 6-12, or they do all 3 levels. They'll do a
Right.
different, they'll say no charging at the high school, period. And then maybe K-5 charges up to $30 or something. And every level's a bit different.
So this discussion's kind of been all over the board.
Yes.
So do you feel like you need some guidance from us, or do you feel like you guys can kind of assess the situation and come up with a recommendation that would be something that we could
Yeah.
say yes to or no to, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
What I heard John say was JC needs a bonus.
Oh.
You know, if I was the only one up here, I would, but.
I tell you, I'd rather just feed everybody for free.
Yeah.
Everybody eats with us breakfast and lunch, and then.
Yeah. And that's actually part of the issue that during, a couple of
Few
years,
years,
everybody
yeah.
got used to eating
Yeah.
for free.
Which was nice. So.
And so we're back to not.
I did want to make one quick comment, a dollar figure to be thinking about. JC mentioned, that there's at-risk money involved with this. So every student that qualifies for free is worth about $2,700 to us. And there are families that qualify that just won't fill out the application. So I don't know how we put some teeth to it to say, hey, come on, just fill out the application. Because that per family, that's 20, or per child, if it's a family of 4, that's 10+ grand that we're leaving on the table. So.
Well, and that's kind of the trigger to if you fill out the application, we've revoked your CASHA ability. If you fill out this application, then no harm, no foul. And it kind of continues as it is today, is where a productive way I see it.
Do you
Well,
guys,
they still have the option to pay for it if they want to pay for it, even if they do qualify. So.
do you guys call and explain that? I mean, if you called me and you're like, look, I know you can't, or you owe this, but if you would fill out this form, I would
Yes.
get this money.
Yeah, because we can't incentivize filling out the nutrition benefit form. It just has to be available and they all see it. But then if we do have students that are like that, we will email and then we will call and explain it to them
Yeah.
and well, I wouldn't say a lot of times. Some of the times we'll get the form they'll finally, it will get turned in and they will qualify for free meals
Yeah.
for their kiddos.
I mean, it's definitely somebody's prerogative to pay for their food even if they qualify, but if they're not, then definitely,
Yeah.
encourage them to fill it out.
This is a question, and maybe Phil, and Skyward, is there an engagement mechanism so we know if people are getting notifications of past due and they're being opened, or is there
Yeah, we can't see anything after email's gone.
Oh,
I
you
mean, it's an email, it's an outbound email. So,
we're not getting bounces, we're not getting
well, if
engagement?
those we do
We are
know-
getting bounces?
Yeah, we know
We're not
about
getting-
those, but we can't tell whether somebody opens it or not.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Now I can see all the ones that have been sent.
okay. Just send outbound, and it's just email. And that's kind of the other component of it. And I know it's a lot of staff time, but we're creating this expectation that everybody has a computer and everybody has an email, and that's not some people's world. Some people's worlds are just a single phone. And so,
Yeah,
you know,
I would also add to that though, having helped and assisted in some of these processes, one of the things that you run into is, those are a lot of times, those are the same ones where the phones go straight to voicemail and the mailbox is full. You send letters in that the mailboxes are overflowing because they don't get the mail, so
Yeah.
I don't know that it matters what system or solution we come up with. We're going to run into those same kinds of issues with that particular clientele.
no argument.
The only other thing I would add is I know I'm pretty hard on, I don't want kids cut off after 6, but I don't mind that staying in there as the last resort punishment. So that way you have look, after 6, we're gonna cut them off. And that way, at least they understand that there is a potential repercussion. And
Again, unless there is an outstanding application for,
well, that's where I would want them to use
For-
their discretion. I mean, if,
but if I'm sorry, I thought they were coming back with the policy recommendation. That's where I'm going with
right.
I'm not disagreeing with.
No,
you.
I think we're on the
Yeah,
same page.
okay.
Yeah.
We do get the nutrition benefit forms turned around very quickly. I mean, as soon as at the beginning, it takes a little bit longer because we're hammered, but throughout this, it is quick. We get them done. As soon as I get them, that is first priority.
Right.
To get it taken care of, processed and info out to the family.
Right. Maybe like a tiered or,
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
I think anybody else have anything?
If you have other questions about any of the policies, let me know and I can spend more time on one or come back and talk about all of them again if you want at the next meeting, but they will be there for approval on the July 8th meeting.
Okay.
And we'll take a better look at EE, see what we can do with it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Moving on to discussion item 8.02, licensed staff retention data.
Yes, every year we have a couple of personnel reports given by our HR department. We had heard one a couple months ago. And tonight is part 2, where we will have Ms. Hackney sharing some information about just retention in general as to positions and fill rates and kind of what are some of the themes that even though they're always changing, that, are kind of, we're hearing are themes as to what staff reasons they stay, as well as what, if there's any, particular reasons to the decision that some staff make, to maybe depart for other opportunities. So at this time, I'm going to let our Director of HR, who does a great job for us, Ms. Michelle Hackney, take over and give us an update on retention efforts.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak with you this evening. This evening, I want to cover a few items. I want to talk a little bit about our retention rates. I want to tell you a little bit about where our staff is going, where they're going. Talk a little bit about our exit and stay interviews, our retention efforts, and the progress we've made. I might preface everything this evening with this information was collected prior to our negotiations settling. So as someone saying, hey, I'm going to school district B, I'm going to make a lot more money. The best I could do is, I think you're going to be making a good amount more here, but sometimes the deed is already done. So I think it will be really interesting to see our data next year as we continue to find ways to really close the gap on pay and some of the different triggers that our staff has indicated as reasons that they have left or might leave. You know, our goal is always retention. You know, for so many years it was to speak to recruiting, you know, big efforts to recruit, and we still do that. But with teacher shortages, shortages, it's really important that we're working equally hard, if not harder, in retaining the great amount of staff that we have and the amount of training and effort that we as a district put into hiring them, training, bringing them into the fold. It's really kind of a big loss when we do lose them to other places. So I have before you right now our retention rate. We went up 0.5% from last year. You can see the last 4 years. Might make note, we had our COVID year, which would have been our 2020, 2021. We saw a higher exit rate during the 21-22 school year. You know, that number of 54 staff members, we had fewer licensed staff members, but more that left us. So we do have an upward movement of our retention rate, which is where we want to be. So really keeping an eye on that number is really important to us. So let's look at where our staff is going this year, those that are departing. We had 5 retirements. Last year, we had 4 retirements. So keeping kind of steady. I anticipate that number probably will be in that neighborhood for the next school year. This year, we had 11 that were leaving K-12 education. In the last year information, we had 13. So that number really hurts me. That's a number of people that 24 of our staff members, licensed staff members, that have chosen to really leave that profession that they've invested at least 4 years of their life studying. So that's one of those that perhaps that they will miss children, miss the impact they're making, and come back to us. And that would be our hopes. But that number really is alarming. This year, we lost 20 of our licensed staff members to other districts, and most of them were nearby. However, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that were a decent distance away from us. So we typically do lose a few to your Olathes, your Shawnee Missions, your Blue Valleys. That number really wasn't much different than normal, but we did have a teacher move to Wichita, Manhattan, Emporia, some of those, and those are often family moves. Out-of-state teaching, this is kind of interesting. So last year was further distances out, Wyoming, Texas. This year we have a teacher moving back to her home state of Mississippi, a couple to Missouri, and one that will be teaching in Mongolia. So out of country on that one. Staying home with children, we had a much higher number last year that were staying home with children. We had 9 people staying home and 7 were with their children. This year we had 1. This particular individual contacted me and said, I love this district. I love teaching here. I love being here. I just can't swing 5 days. So we've hired her back on as a building sub. So we're able to keep her expertise, get another sub into, it's one of our larger buildings, and with the hopes that someday she'll be joining us back full time. So that was a real positive there. We had lost 3 of our teachers last year to administrative jobs, and we didn't have any that moved into administrative jobs. We did have 1 administrator move out of state to an administrative job, and then 5 unknowns. Sometimes we do learn where exactly they did go, but at this point, those were unknowns. I called principals, do you have any insight? And we weren't able to get that information. So before I go on to the next slide, any questions on this one? Okay, so kind of our big brainstorm will be, I think, figuring out, you know, we've got some of the money things, we're looking at those, we're figuring those out. Our negotiations were quite positive in that area. So hopefully keeping some of our teachers more with us. Not going to some of our area districts, but that leaving K-12 education is the one I'm really worried about.
Actually, Mrs., I did have a question, I'm sorry. On people with leaving to stay home with children, are these people that we know were wanting ELA spots? Or, I mean, because for it to go from, what did you say, 9 to 1, it sounds like, is ELA playing a part in that reduction is kind of my question, or do we have an idea?
And English,
The Early Learning Academy.
no, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, it was more, this particular individual was a daycare issue. Now, last year it was, I need to spend more time with my kids, the school year prior. We had some more FMLA, like they had exhausted FMLA and needed to care for an
Okay,
ailing.
I just was seeing if the Early Learning Academy was playing a part in this. at all.
Yeah.
I do have a question, and if you
Mhm.
don't know the answer there, I don't want it to be a, something that you feel like you have to answer right on the spot, but have you and Doug maybe quantified like how much it takes to train, how much money it takes to train somebody? So when they leave and you have to replace them with somebody new, what that dollar amount is? Do you have any idea? Or is it just dependent on who they are and what they're doing?
I don't have a number. I've heard out there is like 20% is what it costs when you lose somebody.
So like 20% of their salary, or is that what you're
I
saying?
believe so. When you have to turn around and invest that, it's starting over with a new employee.
Yeah.
But I don't have any.
I just hear other businesses talk about it costs us,
Oh, it's expensive.
so much to start a new employee. And I was just curious if we
Yeah.
had that kind of a number.
My national HR organization, I can get my hands on it. It's after 1 year, it's this much, after 2 years. So I'll provide that to you.
Gotcha. It's not, I was just curious if.
No, it's really good information, but it is sizable.
Yeah.
On the people leaving the K-12 education, is it, I'm sure you have the data on, is it more teachers that are new or have been with the district for a short period of time, or is it people who? Or is
It
just
really
It
varies,
does.
and the reason varies. Some of it, I'm chasing my dream. One in particular, he's going to become a pilot. It's been a lifelong dream. He's young enough. He said, if I don't do it now, I won't do it. But I love teaching, so I do know that if this doesn't work out, I'll come back. And then there are others that I'm just done, and, stranger things have happened. We've had some of those that are done that go, man, I wasn't making a difference in corporate world. I'd like to come back. So we'll be hopeful that, those 24, that a few of them at least come back to us. And I will welcome them with open arms. And during my exit interviews, and I do say it authentically. And if I do say it to someone, they should know it's authentic. If I say the door is always open, they're leaving on good terms, they've done a great job for us, we would welcome them back. So
And when you say 24, that's 24 in the last 2 years?
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this year was 11. Okay. And so you've got the information from the year before. And then, so those are some numbers that we have. And then there are some less formal, we could do this a much more formal way, but gathering information through stay interviews, exit interviews, surveys, talking to people in person. And the way I've done it has been primarily just to gather some information for me to help make the place better, to make the district better. If I see themes within maybe buildings, being able to talk to a principal going, hey, person after person is always reporting that this is really awesome in your building, or person after person is reporting that this would be an area that we could work on. So using that information. So our exit themes during the exit interviews, it's not required to do it. The number varies from year to year, but here are the reasons why those that were exiting said that they were exiting beyond where they were going, pursuing other opportunities. It might have been retirement, dealing with behaviors, pay. We lost, I believe, 5 people to Olathe School District this year. And many of those, not all 5, but most of those did say that the insurance benefits for that particular school district were much better. And it's something that they were really needing at that point in their life. Commute, gas prices, driving a great distance for some, when gas was cheaper, that might have been a little bit more doable. So some of those reasons there, and those are in the order of frequency that those popped up. I love this slide. As I was looking through, one question is, what do you look forward to each day? 492 mentions of kids or students, and done in a positive way. This is a student-centered district, hands down. We didn't have 492 people answer, but we had many, many staff members mention their students over and over and over. So I love that number. It really speaks to the quality of our staff and why they are here. Many mention that they look forward to seeing their colleagues, their teams, their coworkers. Back when I started teaching 100 years ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, you were kind of an island. You went, you taught, you left, and your team was not that important in the equation. It really shows how important our teams are, building those relationships with those you work with. So 156 mentions there. And then I love this number as well, that many cited making a difference, the purpose that they are filling with becoming an educator. So there's some interesting numbers there. The next slide, why have you chosen to stay? And those items, I won't read them aloud to you, but the ones that have an asterisk were mentioned frequently. Those are some of the big reasons that people have chosen to stay. When we get onto the slides that deal with the retention study done by ESU and KSDE, you'll see some of these pop up there as being things that we're quite positive with. So you can read through those. I love seeing that sense of belonging. Might also draw attention that the principal was a reason why staff have chosen to stay. And I think that really speaks to the importance of our principals in our buildings, our location, their children go to school here, the great resources that we have. One question on the stay interview is, and that was offered up to all of our licensed staff that were staying in the district. This question was, what could cause you to leave? These are people that are committing to stay or have committed to staying, but pay is one of those that if this doesn't improve, I might leave. What do? We improved it. So well, hopefully they'll stay. But if they didn't feel like they were supported or valued, that might be a reason. If they continue to feel stretched too thin, stress. And then another question, what was the least favorite part of the job? Subbing popped up quite a bit, not nearly as much as it did last year. So we worked on that. We plan on working on that even more. So hopefully that continues to show up less and less. Plan time popped up a ton this year. We are doing some addressing of that. Behaviors popped up quite a bit. You can read the rest there. What was interesting last year, the information was a great deal of employee mental health. That popped up a lot. We really had a concentrated effort of making sure that we had the good resources for our staff, how to access that, really pushed that heavily. So perhaps that played a part. I don't know that it solved the problem completely, but it did. It found its way off of the list. Stress would still probably fall under that and whatnot. And the negative opinions of educators, you're going to see that pop up also on the retention study. Okay, should have brought my water up here. I'm just talking too much. Ideas to make things better. Some of these items were items that appeared once or twice, and those are indicated without a number next to them. Thank you. Sorry, that's yours. I gave away. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you very much. Those that have numbers, those appeared several times. I've got some of the numbers listed. Besides those, pay is one of those that you're going to hear quite often. Hopefully that number goes down. Some interesting ideas. It appeared once, but it's something I can do something about. Internal job openings. This person wanted those pushed out to staff before they became public. I can do that really easy. Particularly as, you know, when we're not in the rush time here this summer, but I can definitely do things like that. Sick leave bank, that has popped up. It's beginning to pop up a little bit more. Just some ideas there. So it's ideas that we'll look at. We obviously can't do everything, but as we get a little bit further to the end of this presentation, you'll see that we have, quite honestly, attacked some of these items already. Ideas, another one, somebody said, hey, you know, I come to work every day and I have like a ton of sick days stored up. I'd love for some recognition of good attendance, you know. That might be something that we could look at, you know, longevity bonus, your alternative school came up. There's some really low hanging fruit that we can easily do here. Others are going to take a lot of time, planning, and resources. Building subs, that popped up. We have, like I said, the teacher that needed to stay home with her child, that we worked out something where she's going to be a building sub. So we did that with one building. And then I have a full-time building sub at another building. Those were additions this year. A half-time building sub already existed at the high school, and then a half-time elementary building sub that we share between some buildings. So we're slowly but surely kind of making progress with that.
So Michelle, when you say full-time building sub, that's just somebody that subs every day somewhere in that building?
Yeah, for this year, the gal that I spoke of, she will be at Prairie Creek. You know, she'll be at Timber Sage. That was the highest need there. So for the days that she's working, she will be there. The middle school, Spring Hill Middle, she will be full-time.
But that position, we're still paying sub rate. They're not.
A little bit of an enhanced sub rate. It's less than a starting salary, teacher salary.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're not a contract employee is kind of where I was going.
Yes, they are. Under both of those are employees of the district.
Okay, they are. Okay.
Yeah, which is different than typically our subs would be. So the one at the high school, one of the elementaries, the new two are all employees of the district. Some of them teach half-time, but so some great ideas that we can look into. So we know that our drivers of retention, lots of research you can look through. We've got it narrowed down to the 6 main ones, you know, that feeling of purpose. How many times did you see that pop up in the information that was provided? A lot. So that's really an important part of this career. Pay and benefits is important. The culture of the building, feeling appreciated. You saw some ideas. Hey, I'd like to be appreciated more, or I'd like to be recognized for my work on committees or for being at work every day. That work-life balance and training and development. So the Kansas Teacher Retention Initiative, that was administered back in 21. And that data was collected, approximately 20,000 participants across the state of Kansas gathered that information. And you're able to get to the link of the information. And then I provided the login in your executive content so you can see the Spring Hill specific, but this link will take you to the state report. Super interesting. Some of the areas that we scored very high in, and I won't read these aloud to you, but I noticed I do have location on there. If I had it 3 times, I could have location, location, location. But these are the items that we have scored quite high on. I do want to make note, and hopefully some of our principals are out there watching, really the importance of principals. The items that we continue to score high on are the support from principals specific to student discipline. So we've heard, hey, I need more help. I need more tools in my toolbox, but my principal is helping me. So that was good information there. principal communication, responsiveness to questions, and then the principal's instructional leadership, and then the relationship with the principal. So, principals are incredibly important. Add on to that, we've got a great location, we've got a great reputation in the district, great technology, and it's a safe place to be. So as we're selling the district, these are items that our staff has identified that we're doing well at. And then areas of improvement, these are items that our staff has identified that that we can improve on. Society's view of the teaching profession, ability to request a sub, plan time, healthcare insurance, supports for challenging behavior. They'd like tuition reimbursement, salary, and potential and growth potential. So areas that we can continue to look at. You'll see some of these themes that are coming up in all the data that we collect. Progress. We've just finished our negotiations. The negotiated agreement is signed, sealed, and posted on our website for your perusal. But things that we have done since this data was collected, we've improved salaries even more significantly. Discretionary leave. Took that from a sick and a personal leave to discretionary leave last year, added an additional day. We improved our parental leave. We're not paying 100% for somebody to be off, but we've made some improvements there. We changed our pay for unused sick leave, added a layer for 5 years, increased the amount of pay, bereavement leave, some other great things. Last year hit true salary schedule movement, some great things there. Things that we've promised through negotiations this year that we're going to look at. We're going to look at studying student behavior. We're going to explore plan time. How can we do that better? Our supplemental salary schedule, insurance, and then through our calendar committee. I've been in this district for a long, long time and been on a lot of calendar committees. This particular calendar for the 25-26 school year is the best calendar I've ever laid my eyes on. It really took into account what the feedback that staff, parents, and many were saying. So, that wasn't part of our negotiations, but I wanted to make note because that is a significant improvement that we've made. And that's all, folks.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
I really appreciate that you, like you said, one person responded, but it was something that you could do quickly and easily. Nothing makes somebody feel heard like that. And they're going to be far more likely to come give you things in the future. And I just think that's amazing that they feel.
Give some credit to Kylie. He's been little Santa Claus, just some tiny little things that, it may be a 1 or 2 people that noted in the hall or in an exit interview or a stay interview that I wouldn't say easily did, but it took a little work, but just really a big bang for very few bucks. And so give credit to when people hear those things that they do try to do as best they can with those.
You didn't show up in a Santa costume, I think.
No, not yet.
I want to be there for that day.
Have the teachers started putting out milk and cookies for Fix-A-Claus?
No, it's really great. And I think the retention where you saw that you lost some with the pandemic and just the, stress and craziness of that, we're back up higher than we were before. So that's really great. So thank you for all the hard work that you do and for even just putting this all together.
We'll keep moving in a positive direction.
I've a couple more comments and they're really for the dais, but when I look at it, and thank you for breaking down the numbers, because when I look at the retention, Dean, I don't want to say Dean, but when you look at retirement, 5 people, people who are moving out of state, these are things that we can't control. So, when I go back and look at that number, our retention rate is really 91.1% in my eyes. We're these people who are making other life choices like that we can't affect. But when I look at it, our leave rate when we take leaving education and going to other districts is 8.9%. And then when you further break that down, our teachers who are choosing other districts is 5.7%, right? So these are people who are saying, it's not me, it's y'all. And, you know, the thing of note there that I'm just gonna say it like it is, that's doubled from last year. It was 10 last year, it's 20 this year. And so highlighting some of the things as you said, we've kind of rolled out the red carpet on a lot of things. And so I would hope to see that number fall back below where it was before.
Yeah.
And that's, again, not a comment
Yeah.
towards you. That is I think we've done a lot of things, and for that number to double from last year to this year, kind of.
And there are a few that moving into leadership, maybe not administrative, but moving from a teacher to maybe a coordinator type position, a few of those. But yeah, when they're just going 15 miles in one direction, that hurts my heart.
There's also though we don't have a lot of housing here. And so some people are driving past how many schools to get here. And some of it can be a distance that they're driving thing that
And you're beating me to my punch, which is,
oh, wow.
my thing, which is of these teachers who are choosing to go to the other districts, how is I'm exactly there. Can we start getting a handle on not only the teachers who have left, but the teachers who are here, who want to live here and be in this community? Can we start quantifying that some way on the employment side? Because that's a problem in our community that I believe can be somewhat solved. So,
And that's a question I can add, or I'm thinking of going more multiple choice on some of this. I love the richness of the information when I do it more open-ended. But
do we have a general concept of how of these 345 and a half people, how many are driving from out of district here?
oh yeah, we can pull that from Skyward
Okay.
if their address is correct. Which I assume they are, because they want.
I hope so. That would be a piece of information I would greatly like to know if the other board members would
We had a
kindly allow me to
an
ask for it.
event on last Friday at Blackhawk Apartment Homes. They have 213 units, I think. They're 100% full. They have 300 people on a waiting list. So I know that like the city has worked on approving apartments and stuff, but none of them are really moving. So when you look at like a nice apartment complexes where a lot of these professional people would like to live, we don't have it, so I think it's going to improve, but it is a challenge that we have. And so something that we as a community can work on.
Well, and I think it's something we as a board can work on, and my punchline to it. So I would be very interested. Is anybody else interested? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I just wanted to capture for the record that the board is asking, not just John Chibwood.
Sonia.
So what I heard is the cost of when we lose someone, and I can get my hands on that, and maybe the number of people that are driving from outside our district.
Or I mean, just generally people who want to move into district, people who want.
Probably heard.
Yeah, I don't want to put a fine point, but you get the general direction.
Yeah, but it'd be good to know some of those things and how we, so we can explore some ways that we could help with that. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to R&R intent, 8.03.
Yes, Mr. Swin is going to briefly we've done this the last 2 years with the revenue neutral rate. One thing that the state of Kansas and every county does annually is every government entity that is a taxing district has to state their intent, whether they plan to exceed the revenue neutral rate or keep it the same as the prior year. And then what the county does, the county takes all of that, and then based on the information you provide, that's what they send out those notices here and sometime in August. That goes there by the really kind of muddies the water because people don't know how to read them, and it's not fully accurate because putting that together at this point in time, we have to base that on so many, a lot of unknowns. And so and you can't really go back and lower, you can't really go back and increase later. And so anyway, Mr. Schwinn's gonna just give you a brief update as to, this is not making any binding decision at all. This is just simply, we got this in the mail just a week and a half ago, and we have to have it back in by July. So we just put it on the agenda for tonight. He's gonna talk about it, and then we would take action on it, just so we can make sure we get the form in as required in time by the July deadline. But and then as we said earlier, later in July this month, since we do have, several new members, we are at our work session. One of the topics we hope that we plan on addressing on July 29th is the, just overall and some general basics about public school finance. So Mr. Schwinn, what would you like to add at this point?
Yeah, could I just preface this real quick with asking, does everybody understand what the R&R deal is, or do you want him to give a little brief overview of what that is? Are you guys, are you good, or do you want him to give a brief overview? Okay, so could you just explain a little bit about how we got to where we are?
Yeah. The first thing I need to do though is I need to make sure that Phil can mute my mic in case I start using curse words. Because when I talk about revenue neutral, it drives me absolutely nuts. It is an absolute waste of time, waste of taxpayer dollars, and pointless. It's absolutely pointless. I believe it was intended to make the budgeting process and people's mill levy more transparent. I'm all for that. We have a budget hearing. And in fact, if you recall last year, we did our revenue neutral rate hearing the same night as the budget hearing. So what are we gaining there? I don't know. So you can talk to anybody that has to do this, and you'll get them riled up real quick. So nobody enjoys this. The counties don't enjoy it. The cities don't enjoy it. And all my colleagues in the school finance don't enjoy it as well.
But
it's here.
People do not have to do it, right?
What's
The
that?
state does not have to revenue neutral for themselves.
Yeah, I don't think the state's involved in this. It's just the cities, the counties, and the school districts. A whole lot of people have to jump through a whole bunch of extra hoops, and I'm not for sure what it's accomplishing. But anyhow, I did that without cursing. That's good. So I do have the form up that shows the deadlines. They just notified me of our revenue neutral rate back on June 14th. For us to be revenue neutral would require a 7.5 mil decrease. That's not possible. Not even possibly possible. We are a growing district, and it's impossible for a growing district to remain revenue neutral. So that's point number one. Point number two is there is a revenue neutral rate for the district, but we as homeowners have a different revenue neutral rate. So the county calculates it based on the whole, but depending on what your assessed valuation did, you may see that we keep the revenue neutral rate flat, or we keep our mill levy flat, and you remain revenue neutral if you didn't have a big property tax increase. On the flip side, though, if you had a huge increase, you may be far higher than what the revenue neutral rate is. So there's a district-wide rate, but then everybody has an individual rate. Unfortunately, the letter that gets mailed out is based on the whole and not on the individual. And that's what creates confusion, especially with us, because it's going to paint a picture of Spring Hill should have dropped their mill levy 7.5 mils to remain revenue neutral, which is not even possible. And so they're going to show, it's going to appear like we're having this huge increase, and we're just trying to keep the mill levy flat or slightly declining. And that is the goal here. And I pulled up, I was short on time, so I had to handwrite it, and I don't have good handwriting, but I will get it typed in when we send it back to the state. What we do have to decide by next meeting tonight, it's just discussion, is what's the lid? Right now, the lid is painted as flat. What's on this form right now is keeping it flat compared to last year. Not being revenue neutral, but a flat mill levy. So last year, I padded it by 2 mills, just in case something came up that we needed to levy a little extra more money to survive. We're not in that situation this year, thanks to current year funding, as well as the additional money in SPED, and then the increase they did on the base state aid per pupil. So I feel very confident being in front of you tonight saying, worst case scenario is the mill levy is going to be flat. Now, I'm hoping once I start putting the budget together, what's even crazy is I can't even put the budget together yet because the software is not even available, but yet we're having to talk about this. That's another thing that burns me, but anyhow, I digress. So the timing is just terrible. So right now I'm telling you, let's set the lid as flat. Hopefully by the time I start assembling the budget, maybe we can offer a little bit of mill levy relief. I don't want to promise anything at this point. It's way, way too early. But that's where we're at this evening. So we got, hopefully between now and next meeting, I'll have budget software to play with, quickly drop some numbers in, see where we're at. And hopefully that lid being flat is a good target because that's what's going to get mailed out to people. That's what they're going to see in their letter. And even at flat, it's going to paint an ugly picture and we may get some calls, but there's nothing we can do about it. With that, did I explain it clear enough or do you have any other questions I might answer?
I don't want to disappoint everybody.
Yeah.
I have questions.
Really?
So, yeah, I know.
Okay.
Well, so this revenue neutral rate is against the base number, whatever, 397 million or whatever the value is, right? This is our tax base.
Yes.
The respective county appraisers, the respective county appraisers went out, appraised, set values, everything within it. That number adds up to whatever hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Right.
That is set, and that's what these numbers are against.
Yes.
They're not impacted by the additional $33,000 in exemption that the legislature just passed and the governor just signed. I'm looking for affirmation that that is true.
We're going in the realm of apples to oranges. They did increase the tax exemptions, my understanding, from 42 to 75.
Right.
That will impact, it won't impact how much, it'll impact how much we are all paying to the state, right? Because you're home for the general fund. For all other funds, it's still going to be at the fully assessed amount. But for what's going to the state to pay for the general fund, we should all see some tax relief. Yes. Does that answer your question?
I think so, but I want to restate it to make sure I understand, which is, I think what you just said is that the $75,000 exemption that the state government granted is only applicable to the 20 mills.
Correct.
So for the sake of argument, I own $100,000 house.
Mm-hmm.
And so 75 comes off of it and it's 25. I am taxed 20 mills on 20, or I'm sorry, I'm taxed 20 mills on 25,000. I am taxed all whatever this adds up to, 40,
the rest,
50, whatever. I am taxed at 50 mills on the full 100,000.
Correct.
Okay, now I understand.
And the key with the general fund is it's not going to affect our budget. It'll affect the state because if they don't have enough money, they're going to have to make it up somewhere. We get funded based on kids, not based on the 20 mills. All of our taxpayers are going to take that general fund money we owe. We're going to ship it off to the state and then the state's going to send us back. Some districts pay far more into the state than what they're actually getting back in state aid. On the flip side, there's very poor districts out in Western Kansas that pay very little into the general fund as a district, but get a whole lot more money back from the state
Okay.
for the general fund. the
But
general fund.
this will make a difference on some people's tax, I mean, everybody's tax bill. It might not be significant.
May not be significant, but yeah, everybody should technically see a little relief for that general fund portion of their taxes.
Unless their valuation went way up.
Correct.
way
Yeah,
up.
way up. It could be, yeah, it could be a wash. So.
But the education thing to the public is that exemption doesn't apply to everything. And that's what
Not
we
the
need to be
full-
able to tell people when they go, "Well, you're still taking my money."
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay.
Any
Does
other
any-
questions?
Does anybody else have any other questions about this? This is relatively new.
Yeah, it's not been around for a long time. I
years?
think
3 years?
third or fourth year that we were doing this. And last year it did generate a few questions, not a lot, but it is confusing. It's just a whole nother hoop, to jump through to get to the same point we were before. So.
And last year, we didn't vote. I just noticed on that first slide that we vote on it this year. Did we vote on it last year?
Last year when I came before you, we didn't have a second meeting in July, so we had to do it all in the same meeting. I brought it to you.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
We had a
did.
trial vote because there wasn't, there was just the one meeting in July and it came early. This year, since we have another meeting that's going to happen in July before the 20th, we have time to have it as a discussion item, bring it back as an action item. So you have time to think about it. Last year, we had no time to think about it.
My second thing is I would talk more if I knew Phil had a bleep button back there.
No bleep buttons. No bleep buttons.
Now, I will say, I just got a number in the mail from the state. In case you're curious, I'm gonna give you just a snippet of the upcoming budget workshop. We are still third in the state for average assessed valuation of a home. That number is now at, any guesses?
585,000.
No, that's more like Blue Valley.
Okay.
We are up to 430,000 for an average home in Spring Hill. And I
In
look
the
back
district, in the whole district.
in the whole district. I'm sorry. Yes, whole district. And I think I went back to less than 10 years ago to see what that number was, and it was like 240,000. So less than 10 years ago, it was about half that amount. Crazy. So we're number 3 in the state. We were only a couple thousand off from passing DeSoto. I think we likely will next year, so we may get to be the number 2 one. We'll never catch Blue Valley. They're I want to say 635. Yeah, and they've been 100,000 plus everybody for years.
So
And it-
the only way that the district would ever go revenue neutral is if you only spent the same amount of money you did this
Same.
year that you did last year.
You got to live off the same amount, which means don't hire any teachers, don't hire any staff,
Inflation.
and don't give any raises and hope that the prices of things don't go up.
Yeah.
But we're getting hit from every angle. We're having to add staff to keep up with the growth. We'd like to give raises to try to keep staff around. And inflation has also been a factor the last couple of years. So that's why if you're a declining district, there's some protections there and you may be able to be revenue neutral. I think last year I heard that there was maybe 4 or 5 statewide out of 286 that actually were revenue neutral. So it's such a real tiny percent. But you have to be in a decline mode to really make the numbers work.
Otherwise, you're cutting, like if a county's doing it and they're not in a declining mode, they're cutting services.
They got to be cutting somewhere. I would think, with us, close to 70% of what we spend are people. And, unless we're willing to let class sizes go through the roof and give everybody a measly raise, like I said, it's not even worth discussing, in my opinion. It's more how do we limit and hopefully lower the mill levy at least a little bit, from year to year. So.
Okay. Does anybody else have any further questions for Doug? Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for keeping it clean.
Yes.
Okay, that ends our discussion items. Future discussion items. We have the student cell phone usage, end of the year staff report, which we just heard, right? Yearly teacher training report, we're going to be hearing in July, school maintenance inventory mid-fall. Does anybody have anything they want to add to that?
I
You
do,
wanna add a, oh, go ahead.
no,
No, go ahead. No, I'm gonna let you talk.
okay. The thing that I wanted to, and I could come to the agenda meeting, but I'll put it out here so we can, is open positions, visiting open positions next month, or probably next meeting. So we're not in the same situation of, we need a virtual teacher for this. Because that's just not a thing.
So you would like to see what open positions we have next meeting?
Basically, what I would like in the next meeting is we don't have people for these teachers and these classes. We have to have an alternative next meeting. Because I didn't
You
mean,
can walk, you don't.
I got it.
No, I do provide that every week. Have you seen?
Right.
What?
And I'll be, for the discussion item for the board is having a drop dead date to that.
Okay.
Because optimism prevailed and all these things, and we're in the position of, this is your only option, you must do that. And so I'm putting out to the board, I would like to have a discussion item about setting date certain that, okay, we're not going to have a science teacher. You're going to have to figure out a different class to fulfill those requirements.
Okay.
So I
That's-
think and you can,
And that is, yeah.
the only thing I would say about that is that things happen. And there could still be changes at the very last minute. Somebody could have a crisis, somebody could, so I don't know, you can say what you want to say, but.
Absolutely. And then what I provide weekly, I can enhance that too from the get-go. But we are switching into, there's a few of the positions that we have 0 applicants for. We do have some plan Bs on that. We have a new, it was a new resignation last Thursday, foreign language. We do have 1 applicant, and the applicant actually looks quite promising. We won't know until we interview the individual. But yeah.
Yeah. And I hear you, but again, I'm speaking, to the dais, is that there's a huge frustration of the community that we were in that position. And I think it's worth having the discussion around having a policy around, this is the drop dead. You have to have the alternate set by then.
Yep.
So that's what I'm putting for the board. Does that make sense?
I'm just not sure how we would handle that because like as a board policy or we can discuss it. I don't.
Yeah, that's where I'm going is.
And we're happy, we're shifting on some of these really to what's the plan B? Like,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen. What are we going to do?
Right.
And would be happy to share that and have a conversation about that.
Yeah, because
John's asking for is, what is that alternative if,
The plan B.
if plan A isn't working, what,
Yeah,
is
so-
there something other, instead of,
I just, when I hear
Yeah,
making policy over something that isn't necessarily something that we have control over at that last minute, that's where I get, but having a discussion about it, I think that's. fine.
Yeah.
and I think it's more just to have not a policy, but like a cutoff date that we can discuss.
Yeah, I'm fine with the expectation, but I'm from my seat. What happened last year was very unfortunate but plan B, anyway, not going to sit here and judge and Monday
Absolutely.
morning quarterback, but you get where I'm going.
I absolutely.
We've got to project something.
And just as a side note too, I'm more than happy to provide additional information in your weekly updates too. So
Okay,
if you have feedback.
And
I can do
even
that.
rather than just a report, like if there's 2 or 3 that are really hard to find right now, even just I think letting people know so that we can spread the net a little wider.
Yeah.
We know, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Can own part of that too. So anything else for this agenda item consideration? Okay, moving on to the board work calendar. Rachel has been working on the 2024-2025 work calendar. And that was linked, well, it's linked here in board docs. And then Candy has also been working on putting statutory dates and what's in statute so we can link those on the board calendar and also on agenda items. So like we know when something's on the agenda, this is in statute that this has to be done at this certain date, or this is just a process that we usually follow in our district, and kind of distinguishing between those types of things. So I did have a question with the organizational meeting. We're doing that on July 22nd, not July 8th.
No, it should be July 8th.
Okay, so maybe this meeting dates, anyway, we can look at it, but it looked like it was all in the July 22nd meeting, but maybe I'm just not looking at it right. So anyway, this will be a good document moving forward, I think, to keep us on track. And if you have questions.
Well, and then the one thing I wanted to add on here is, you know, coming out of our work session, and, you know, this is kind of the official changeover from the old board meeting, BOE meeting dates document to the new one. And so I just want to restate what we said, and maybe we can capture it here, is that we're changing meeting times to 6 o'clock.
Yep.
So that's new to this as well. The other thing that we talked about and came to agreement on, I believe that we came to agreement on, was that the agenda meetings were going to start happening the Thursday before the Monday. So we had 2 days where the documents were going to be turned in, right?
Yes, so
This
the
was-
Thursday, like last Thursday
Yeah.
was our agenda meeting. So the idea is that Wednesday, the agenda would be set, but Thursday we'd have our meeting, and things may change according to how that meeting goes, but not a whole week before.
Well, I'm going for so today's the 24th, just so we can all look at our calendars. The discussion that I thought we had, and people can correct me where I'm wrong. So today's the 24th of June. That means, and when the agenda meeting it happens is kind of not the point of this, that the documents for this meeting that the board is expected to review and be prepared to discuss and or act on would be online in board docs by the 20th. So the board would
Yes.
have
Yes.
the 20th, the
Yeah.
21st and the 24th to review them, ask questions, et cetera.
Yes.
That's what we're changing. That's what we agreed to and changing.
Yep.
When we have the agenda review meeting is different.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I was thinking you were saying the week before that.
When the agenda review meeting, it's kind of immaterial to the fact that we as the board need to have those materials and set the expectations for ourselves that we're going to work on reading, reviewing, asking questions, et cetera. And that with the exception of like Mr. Schwinn's I wrote checks report that gets issued when it gets issued, right? Or, you know, somebody resigned today. Well, that got added to the document because that's when they resigned, right?
Well,
But
and I also think we need to be a little bit flexible, like if you get a quote in.
Well, and that's,
Upload
but
it.
that's that's kind of where I'm going, which is this is setting the expectation that we're pushing down that no, we've got to have the insurance quote in by then. We have to have time to review it.
But we can still delay it another meeting if we wanted.
But we couldn't delay, but that's kind of exactly where I'm going, which is there wasn't delaying this.
Right.
There isn't delaying the insurance thing. It had to be acted upon. And that's the whole purpose of pushing this to say, these things have to be done by this date. So the board has time to review them.
No,
That's the whole
I
purpose.
understand what you're saying. I understand.
And so I also get what you're saying, that we do need to be flexible, but that
You
flexible,
don't want to be.
well, no, that flexibility is
I
a
understand what you're,
different level of flexibility that has been in the past.
right. I understand what you're saying. You want to set a new precedent to.
Well, I think that's what the board agreed to. Am I wrong?
Yeah. Yeah, no, no.
Okay, I'm looking around to make sure and I'm getting nodding heads. So
One other thing that I'd like to kind of throw in on this discussion. Rachel did send out calendar invites for all the meetings and all the agenda review meetings. Agenda review meetings, we can only have 3 people there. So, if you went through and just like responded yes to everything for the year, or, you know, if you could go back like the week before, because you can change that, right? From yes to no.
Yes.
So just don't make her chase you down. And if there's 4 people for the agenda review meeting, we probably.
well,
We don't know how to. we can't
Well,
see
that's-
that. So that's why I just have to wait for her to send me a text and
Okay.
go, did you really
Yeah.
want to be here or not? And then I
Okay.
go,
I
yes.
guess this
or-
has to be hidden. Otherwise
Okay,
it's an
it has
open
to be
meeting.
hidden. Oh, otherwise.
well,
We can't
I-
see. who's-
I think we can have a discussion about that because as long as we're not writing things in it, who's there is not, I don't think it crosses the line.
Can't have more.
I know we can't have more than 3, but
But-
we can have visibility to who's there. Yeah, I don't think we can have a discussion and I'm obviously not giving you direction, but the calendar invite, the list of attendees is something we can all see. None of us should be making comment on that. That is where we cross the line.
Gotcha.
But are we
Well-
gonna keep the sign up, the Google Docs sign up? Cause
Yes.
I liked that a lot.
I love it. I
I
am
love the calendar invites. That's amazing.
going,
Doesn't like the Google Docs.
I thought the calendar invite was, that's what we were using instead of the Google.
I can't spell Google, so
So,
I just like the calendar invite.
yeah,
But all I need is just, if we can just limit, I mean, I know you have to chase me down because I don't open my email all the time. You have to text me. But if you text me, I respond. So, but I don't, I mean, or if we just,
Let's maybe try it from the standpoint that you can let Doug or I know if there's more than one stand up and and one of us can contact the 2 people and.
We just don't know though, because we
Yeah.
can't see it. Like, I have no idea if somebody's gonna be there at the next one.
But
So-
we can maybe handle that on our end, so Rachel's not policing it. As long as we're not talking to a whole bunch of people about
well, I think we can have a discussion around opening it up so we can see who the attendees are.
it. We just need to have it be an easier process than her having to chase everybody down every.
Well, and I think that's exactly what I'm advocating for is I think we're all sitting here saying, if we can see if somebody else is not going to be there, I would be,
That's right. Right. That's
Okay.
right. I
So
wanna
we
know.
can
if
So-
talk
we're gonna be
about
there.
how we can do that. So, yeah, okay. I think we all kind of on the same page on that, but we'll see what we can do and still put you in a comfortable spot with the open meetings.
it was great in theory, but in practice, we're struggling.
I don't know. I like the text from Rachel every
Yeah.
week, so it's nice to say, hey.
We like hearing from you. Okay. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, so that was board work calendar, board member reports. Does anybody, it's come slow time of year for all this. Does anybody have a board member report? No board member report. Seeing none, superintendent report.
Most of the few items I have are already been mentioned this evening, but again, reminder that after this evening, our next meeting will be in the new fiscal year, which will have all of our meetings, unless this otherwise noted, will begin at a start time of 6 o'clock in the evening. Also, has been mentioned, there'll be a 5th Monday work session on Monday, July 29th, with the main topic focus, although we may have a few other small ones as well, but the primary topic right now would be on just general school finance, and Mr. Schwinn is working with that to develop that, especially since, like I said, it's always good to refresh that, even with, if you're a veteran member, because it can be complex. And then, as we said also, the USD230 campus will be closed on July 4th as a holiday in observance of Independence Day. That's my superintendent's report. It's kind of summer, so dog days of heat, and we'll be picking it back up though, once mid-July gets here for sure.
Okay, and we do need an executive session.
Madam President, I move the board go into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel to protect the privacy interest of an identifiable individuals under coma. Those to be in the in session include Board of Education members, Superintendent of Schools, and others as requested. The executive session is to begin at 9:05, with the open meeting resuming no later than 9:30 at this place.
Good. Okay. There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to go into executive session for items that were stated. Please collect the vote.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
approved.
Okay, we are back in session. Are we back in session, Mr. Elliott? We are back in session.
All right, Madam President, I move to approve item 14.01, the superintendent contract as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the superintendent contract as presented and recommended. Is there any discussion? Hey, Mrs. Henderson, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
approved.
Okay, we are adjourned.